to bring us back to earth, continuing this conversation about the dreams and realities of India, we have a session called Dreams of Singapore in Vidarbha. And that is not just to deal with the realities of India, but to understand what are the aspirations, what are the visions of the future, and who better to understand that than entrepreneurs. We've been talking about the planning, we've been talking about government, we've been talking about the ethics and morality of wealth creation, but we haven't yet really discussed the dreams and aspirations. And entrepreneurship, essentially, is to intuit the future desires of consumers and societies. So to discuss whether India has dreams of Singapore and Vidarbha, whether those are viable dreams, whether businessmen in India are on the correct track, we have Singh, Sunil Munjal, and Ronnie Screwvala. Do welcome them on stage. Each of them run massive empires. Each of them are very wealthy men. Because you know all of them, I'm not going to go into their achievements and their accomplishments of their companies. What we are much more interested in is, as I said, their intuiting of the futures of Indians and their dreams and aspirations. Ronnie, I'd like to start with you, because you were in the business of selling dreams, which was cinema. And that's what your core job has been. But when we approached you to speak, you said that you wanted to not speak about cinema and media, but about rural entrepreneurship. And you now have a foundation called the Swadesh Foundation, which is pledged to bring 1 million people in Maharashtra out of poverty, and your focus is on rural entrepreneurship. So at a time when we've all been discussing the consumerist dreams, the idea of bringing people into Shanghai or Singapore or Dubai, you're an entrepreneur that is focusing on creating social and rural entrepreneurship. What took you there? What shifted your attention from, well, not shifted your attention, what brought your attention to rural India?
I think the three parts that I'd like to break this up into. First, and the core of it is entrepreneurship. I think we need to realize that if we're calling ourselves the young India, there are not going to be enough jobs for everybody. And I think from that perspective, where are entrepreneurs over the next 5, 10, and 15 years going to figure out where they're going to get the next opportunities? I don't think it's necessarily going to come only from new media, e-commerce, and .com, which seems to be the road everyone seems to be traversing on. I'm a firm believer that actually rural India will offer a lot of opportunities in social entrepreneurship. I do want to sort of segregate rural participation and rural social service from social entrepreneurship. Because I think the other perception, and we're just starting off on this road, India's starting off on this road of social entrepreneurship, and I don't want it misconceived that actually social entrepreneurship seems to be a low-return business where an entrepreneur needs to have a social mindset to get in there, and therefore he'll have low returns. In fact, it could actually be the opposite. Because in most other places, and especially in urban India, you have high competition. We have a herd mentality in India where almost every time you start a new sector or a new industry, 500 people think it's a fantastic idea and come piling on. So you have a most competitive environment. And I think if we actually look at rural India, there are going to be tremendous opportunities. I personally am a strong advocate that everyone between the age of 18 to 25 should be mandatorily allowed to serve 6 months in rural India. Pretty much like how France or the US or even Singapore tell you to go and spend a year in the army.
Conscription, yeah.
And I think firstly it's going to benefit them hugely. Personally, I think it's going to first benefit them hugely. Second, obviously, they're going to be able to understand how the other half lives. And if we don't get the 600 million people and figure out what the business opportunities for there, it's not going to change that completely. But third and most importantly, I think in 6 months, they'll come back with business ideas of what the opportunities are.
So, Ronnie, before I move to KD and Sunil Munjal, can you spell out what is the social entrepreneurship there? What is the business model that you're involved in? What is it that you have what are the ideas you've come back with?
Well, I think if you look at outside of the urban cities, the first and obvious ones, and I think we've been doing a fair amount of, everyone's talking about the fact that Africa is the next agrarian country, but I think India still has a lot to do there. I think just our agriculture sector here has a perception problem. Number one, we think everyone is a farmer, and therefore it's one of these small-scale situations from that, and not so at all. There's a tremendous amount of scope for consolidation in the agri space. There's a tremendous amount of consolidation for us to be able to work with the people there to create brands and create scalable opportunities in agriculture, which we haven't even touched the iceberg on. The second is really rural health, and right now it's at the abysmal stage. So if you look at some of the opportunities just in these two sectors, and of course the sort of 8-pound gorilla in the room is education. If you just take these three opportunities, I think it would dwarf anything that we're doing in the services industry and in the manufacturing industry in India.
No, I just meant to spell out that business, Ronnie, in numbers. For instance, if you get involved with rural health, how does that become a business?
Let me give you one example. I think, well, firstly, it's a fact that we're the blind capital of the world. What does that mean? Not that everyone's born blind, but 50% of everyone who's either blind or going blind in the world resides in India. Okay, and I think that in itself reflects a very, very tall opportunity in the healthcare sector. If you're looking at anyone, insurance hasn't penetrated into rural India for only one reason. You don't have a tertiary medical center, and you have no other depth where people can actually go out there and get medical aid. So the ability for actually starting chains of hospitals and medical care centers in rural India, and rural India is not just a village or a hamlet. It is actually the smaller cities, the sub 1 million civilization cities, and there's a tremendous amount of them.
Incidentally, it's not just blindness, by the way. We are also the diabetes capital of the world,
Capital.
and cardiac disease, and now increasingly cancer.
Tuberculosis, diarrhea,
Yep.
encephalitis, can name them.
And
yeah.
absolutely, Sunil is absolutely right. The reason I was trying to take the sort of the simpler level of the pyramid is because as soon as we get to some of the higher ones which are there, then we come across the big problem where we don't have enough qualified doctors in this country. Let's be very clear. And to get doctors into rural India is a different thought process. Eye care suddenly has a little bit more of a 9-to-5 approach than a 24-hour emergency approach when you're looking at some of the other ones.
You know, Ronnie, I'll move to the others, but just to leave this, I'd like to come back with this question that we've been talking so much about how government is trying to precipitate, catalyze, help big industry, big corporates. I wanted to come back to say that is there any planning at all to amplify this kind of social and rural entrepreneurship? But before we do that, Kidi, you're a member of parliament, you're from the TMC. Many people see Mamata Banerjee's economic policies as being atavistic, not in keeping with time. She has been consistent with that position. All this while we've been discussing that the only way for growth in India is to move towards industry and have, economic reform. She, on the other hand, has been, opposing FDI. She has been insisting on the Land Acquisition Act being much more democratic than it currently is constructed to be. And yet people fear that Bengal will not move and it will not develop. Can you spell out her vision and whether, as a businessman, you feel uncomfortable with that vision?
No, thank you for, first of all, giving me opportunity to put across the point of view of the party which I represent. You see, we are a party of Aam Aadmi. Now, when we talk of, we are not anti-reformist. When we talk of reforms, if you say, first of all, let's say, what is the meaning of reforms? In the garb of reforms, we are doing a lot many things. This government is trying to do a lot many things. The reform, if I pick up the Oxford Dictionary, it says to bring about the change for betterment. Now, if increasing the price of the diesel is reform, yes, we are against it. If acquiring the land forcibly from the people who are unwilling to give you the land, we are against it. We are not against the reforms per se. We did not oppose FDI in aviation. But yes, we are against the FDI in pension funds. Because pension funds, if I give you the numbers, in the economic meltdown, New York City, their own pension fund, they lost $40 billion. Now, are we mature enough? Do we have our social security systems in place? Can we afford, if the FDI comes in pension and the money is given in the hands of the foreigners to play around, there is a possibility that the money can be lost, as I'm giving you example. OECD countries in 2008 meltdown lost $4.5 trillion. They're all developed economies. So we are against such things. We are not against per se reforms. It is a wrong notion, it's a wrong propaganda that we are against reforms. Our party is definitely not against reforms. And when when Mamta ji says something, it's for the common man. The common man, this country is 120 crore people, out of which 190 crore are common men. Common admi, aam admi, where if you increase the diesel price, it hurts. If you increase the cooking gas, it hurts. Now, I know our critics will turn around and say that this makes economic prudence. How do you handle the economic prudence? But well, that's the governance. The governance is to create the right balance. You know, they say like darkness is not the opposite of light. It's merely the absence of light. Similarly, if there is a problem, it is not the absence of a solution. It is merely the absence of an idea. This government is out of ideas.
So, KD, in fact, every time one is in a media debate about economic reform, and when everyone felt that the economy is slowing down, there was a panic in the middle class and in the media about it. All the conversation used to hinge on these three things, you know, the Land Acquisition Act, FDI in insurance, FDI in aviation, and FDI in retail. And I kept asking people, why is it that the economy of this entire country depends on these three reforms? So, you know, you're also part of the business fraternity. If for a moment you take off your TMC hat and put on your businessman's hat, can you help us understand why your fraternity believes that that's the only three things that will galvanize growth in this country?
Incorrect. FDI is not a magic wand. It's not that FDI will come and it'll be answer to all your problems. It's incorrect. I come from a business background, but you know, let me give you a very Mamta ji's thinking and the angst of the Aam Aadmi. In, if you permit me, in a poetic answer, it says, "Ho chuki hai peer." Peer is the morning, the dawn. "Ho chuki hai peer, पर्वत सी पिघलनी चाहिए. इस हिमालय से एक और गंगा निकलनी चाहिए. सिर्फ हंगामा खड़ा करना मेरा मकसद नहीं. मेरी कोशिश है कि ये सूरत बदलनी चाहिए. तेरे सीने में जले या मेरे सीने में सही, हो कहीं भी आग, पर ये आग जरूर जलनी चाहिए. That's the angst. That's the angst of this country. That was the angst which I also felt. The corruption. I have seen corruption from very close quarters. For the benefit of the audience, I don't know if everyone knows about me or not, I was 19 years of age when I started business with nothing in my hands. I was born in a very small family, a middle-class family. I've gone to those schools where we did not have benches, where we studied under the trees. I remember the fees which I paid till my 5th standard was 3 naya paisa. That's the Aam Aadmi. From that Aam Aadmi, I climbed, I worked hard, created an enterprise, which is today valued at about $2 billion. But having reached there, having arrived there, I still feel the common man residing inside me, and I felt that angst. That angst forced me to resign. I've resigned all my corporate positions, as you know, and I have joined politics. Now, this joining politics is out of, it hurts. It hurts when I see all those things. So everyone, this angst comes out in the form of Anna or Kejriwal or the IS officers like Tehelka or people like me. So it is, when you say that wear the business hat and say that this is right, I'm surrounded by business people with all the, I seek their forgiveness, both of you also. See, when you do business, there is only one motive: to make money. Nothing wrong, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what even I did. When I was doing business, that was the motive. But when you think, I remember when I entered parliament, I came back and told my wife, I said, my life has changed. She says, what has changed? I said, when I walked through those corridors, when I entered those benches inside the parliament, I felt a larger picture of the country. That this country is much beyond my own profit thinking. this country is, I'll give you one small example. It's not out of the newspapers or my own thing which I have seen myself. I was in a tribal area. A person brought a small child to the hospital. The doctor checked, he said, unfortunately, the child could not be saved. Few hours, the child passed away. The doctor asked that man that this child was unwell, why could you not bring him early? We could have saved him. He says, Saab, mere paas paise nahi the, bus ke kiraye ke. It took him 3 days to collect the money from the village for his bus fare. Now, when you increase 5 rupees diesel, I remember the face of that child.
But Katie, I'm just leaving these one question because I don't want to exclude anyone from the question, but from the session. But the question I'd like to come back to you with is that Bengal is still asking for a huge bailout package from the center. And just to be the devil's advocate, I don't necessarily believe that this is the way to go about it. But the truth of the matter is that it is big industry. It is that kind of wealth creation that has happened since 1991 that is also enabling the exchequer to be rich enough to do all the kind of welfare that we want for the country. So if in the future TMC was to come to the central government, would it still have the policies that it has for the state government? Because, at least when you're in the state government, you can still apply for, loan waivers, for funds, for emergency relief to the center, which is grappling many more complexities. So that's one thought I'd like to leave with you, that will these policies be valid if you come to the center? With that, Mr. Munjal, you run one of the most profitable companies in the country. You've just split with Honda. Your own brand is something that is a global brand. And you've been working in that middle segment when people just come into the realm of aspiration and material desire. What do you intuit India is going to be in 50 years?
When I was just driving in here, I was actually told that the session is 3:40, so I was planning to come in here at 3:30. Just in time is an old habit. And I normally try and look at what the session is about 10 or 15 minutes before it starts.
Are you regretting that you heard 5 minutes of our event?
No, I'm actually quite pleased. When I walked in, first I was told it's a little bit earlier than I knew. And then I read all of these think. It says think Airtel, think SR, think. So I said, this is interesting. I think one should not only think, one should also use one's imagination a little bit. So if you'll give me a little bit of leeway, what I'd like to do is imagine the Think Festival taking place in 2062, which is 50 years out from today. Okay? Tarun, I don't know what his age would be, or
Visually, it seems he won't be around, but physically,
yeah, Tarun's ghost
he will
be somewhere up there. His spirit will be around. And so what would this look like? I think that's a dream that all of us as Indians have. No matter whether you're rich or poor, live in a city or an urban area. By the way, there is an issue. To the point that both of them made, I have a very strong view on both of these. And it is a big issue because if we don't do what needs to be done, we will see the biggest migration in the history of mankind ever in the next 30 years. Not in the long-term future, in the next 30 years. Because 68% of India lives in the rural areas right now. And that's going to change. They will move to where the current opportunities are, which is to the tier 2 towns, tier 3 towns, and to the cities. And our current infrastructure is already creaking. It's going to give up completely. But I was just thinking about this, literally walking in. And I said, what would be a utopian situation for us Indians? So we're here in some place called New Goa, not here, it's a new city, that India decided in the year 2012, or 2015 actually, to announce 100 new cities that we would build. And these cities are designed around transportation, jobs, and energy and food as the common theme around them. You would have learned by then to generate water, so you would actually not have to worry too much. But because you focus on organic farming, every building would be doing farming. Every building itself would have its own vegetables and fruits growing on the top floor. And people would be able to walk to work. And the highest emission standards would be those which would be for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Anything else would not actually be permitted. India would have an education system which would have students from 250 countries, where you would encourage students from the year when they're age 8 to pick the profession they want to be in the future, and to focus and learn that. They don't have necessarily to get a BA or a BCom degree. If you want to be a musician, you learn music. If you want to be a dancer, you become a dancer. If you want to be a mason, you become a mason. And we would have learned to encourage personal passion, personal creativity, because the problem today in the world is that the personal space and the collective public space often tend to impinge on each other. The way we think or way we would like an ideal situation around us is not necessarily in congruence with what we would like to see of the world around us. So we probably would have learned, we hopefully would have learned by then to strike this balance, where India would have become the largest economy in the world some time back, or amongst the largest economies in the world some time back, and would have the luxury to have wiped out poverty at least 20 years ago. Because unless you can do that, I completely agree with both of them, unless you can do that, you cannot address any other challenge. That is and continues to be the biggest challenge that we face as a nation, is 250 to 350 million living in abject poverty. And I'm talking about those who don't get 2 square meals a day. I'm not talking about the numbers that Katie is talking about, because that's a much larger number, which of course needs to be addressed. And I think it is a possibility, because the current state is, in a sense, what he said, that people said politicians and diapers have a lot in common. And that's the reason, and it's the same reason they both need to be changed frequently.
But Mr. Munjal, sorry, when you're spelling out this utopia, and it does sound utopian that everyone can, live up to their individual talents and dreams and aspirations. But before that, you mentioned that if we don't do what is necessary now, that there will be a massive implosion because there will be this migration.
Yep.
My question is, why are we creating this suction? Why are we pulling everybody off 75% of the land into 2% of the land? Why can't we create a centrifugal force which will push people back and give them these amenities where they live?
Absolutely.
Why is that thinking not happening?
That is absolutely the right thing to do. In 2004-05, along with the World Economic Forum, we built a scenario plan for India. It was very interesting. I don't know how many people in this audience have actually heard or read about this scenario plan which was built. It showed 3 possibilities, and they had 2 names, and the Indian name for each one was, the lowest one was Atakta Bharat. Second one was called Bolly World, and third one, Bolly World. And the third one was called, which was utopian, was Pehle Aap. And in the Pehle Aap situation was what I said, that people are concerned about not just themselves, but what's around them, and you do the right thing. And it is possible for India to continue to grow at over 10%, because unless we do that for a continuous 20 to 25 years, you cannot wipe away this poverty. You cannot get to where you would like to be. And that's the point where I have an issue with what Katie said. Because you cannot have a narrow view only of diesel prices and not look at the larger picture. Because both are necessary, by the way. It's important to make sure that the common man in India is able to do what he or she needs to do, especially she. We need to focus a little bit more on women, who are actually the much smarter species, by the way.
I so agree with you.
and they're
not
smart
because
enough,
I'm a woman, but because
they're also smart enough to let men think they're smarter. The Bolly world was an interesting one. It actually showed that the growth would be what it is now, because that's when India's growth was really taking off. But we'll actually taper off, and we are doing exactly that. The Atakta Bharat was a scenario where you have social strife, religious tension, the Naxal movement explodes and expands into other parts of India, and other such disruptive forces come in. And so we need to, in a sense, watch out. So we actually started a program called the Rural Business Hubs. This was based on a program in Japan, which was built about 40 years ago, I think, which was one village, one product. It is to build the concept of a super cluster to build economic opportunities in the rural areas based on current skills and the current people. Not companies coming in and taking over those opportunities, but the local population gaining from those. We are running about 110 or 120 of those. and some of them very, very successfully.
Can you spell out what it is you do?
The first one was started in a place just outside of Nainital. It was focused on apple processing, because there's lots of apple in Ranikhet. It was in the area of Ranikhet in that area. There were about 12 processing plants, so we called in ITC's food division, to come in and see how they could help. So they went around and they rejected every single one of them. On the one hand, there was despondence that this is not good, but the other hand, this is exactly what we were trying to figure out. How do you create products and services in the rural areas which are as good as any in the world? Not as good as the next town, by the way. Not to sell only in the next village, but to sell any place in the world. And I can guarantee you, if you do that, and I can give you a few more examples, because some of them, as I said, are working wonderfully, you will create not just the world's largest growth market, you will create the largest value addition in India. You will create, and Ronnie is absolutely right there, by the way, you will create the largest export engine of India coming from the rural areas. There's another one which is called Jaipur Rugs, which many of you may have heard of. They have 250,000 women working now, and these are weavers who have been given looms, they're given know-how, technology, taught design, and provided materials, and these rugs are taken back and sold not just in India, but literally any place in the world.
This is something that your company does, or is it through a
No,
foundation?
this is through CII, but I've been involved personally through some of our family foundation and trust do some of these things. The company focuses mostly on what it needs to do as a company.
Before I come back to the questions, I left you all with just one question, Mr. Munjal. As big businessman, you have a lot of say in government, your voice is heard. You just spelt out this utopian world where individual homes or clusters will be growing vegetables on their own roofs, will be generating water. Why is it that there is absolutely no emphasis on water harvesting? One never hears of the industrial or big business inveigling upon the government to start thinking on these terms.
Actually, it's an important subject you brought up. It is the world's most under-addressed big problem today. And certainly India's most under-addressed big problem today. There has been discussion. It's not as if nobody's talked about this. Well, as a company, we do this extensively. We have the world's largest green roof in the new plant we've set up. We not only do this in our homes, we ask all the executives in the companies to do this themselves in their homes, because the idea is to kind of create a multiplier. In one company, it's easy to do. That's not good enough. No 1, no 10, and no 100 companies can do enough. It has to spread as a movement across the nation. And it's not just the government's job. It's each one of us, every one of us sitting in the hall, and everyone who's not in this hall.
Ronnie, quickly, because we're going to run out of time. He talked about this sucking of people in, and you're talking actually of going down to the ground. Is government thinking about it? Are they supporting initiatives like yours?
Supportive, yes, I think, but overall for social entrepreneurship and for that entire progress, I think we should really count on the government out. They've got their social welfare schemes, and actually there is a fair amount of implementation. But I think there's a general consensus that we all know here that government should stay out of business. I think Praful Bhai was very nice enough yesterday to say, if you all fly Air India, then Air India will prosper. Well, I'm a paying consumer. If I don't like the service, in normal countries, I stop flying that airline and it shuts down. But we put $4 billion last year, and I think we'll continue to put $2 billion. We put that same money into rural emancipation or rural progress, a tremendous amount will happen. This does not require political will, which everyone keeps talking about. It just needs strong executive action of people at the top, a decision maker who's empowered, the Prime Minister of this country, or the aviation minister of this country. But that's something I think we'll all grow out of. So I don't have that kind of faith yet to work in that kind of a partnership when we're looking at rural and social entrepreneurship. But I do believe, therefore, that the word entrepreneurship in itself is very emancipated. Because you're talking about young India, you're talking about giving them business opportunities. The word jugaad is something we've mentioned for the last 3 days, and that's what we all are. We have always been brought up, and the reason why we're great entrepreneurs in this country is because the absolute adversities we face and the solutions we find out of that make us phenomenal entrepreneurs. So I think that's a phenomenal asset of this company. If you just channelize that, take these business opportunities, and I agree, the fourth one I really left out was really water. And I think our two agriculturists who were with us here yesterday, landowners are not landowners anymore from that perspective. When there was a negative or sort of nervous laughter in the audience about a 50 rupee chai and a 20 rupee bottle. But actually, we've got a serious problem right there. So if you just take these four things of agriculture, health, education, and water, do we really need to look further?
Yeah, in fact, it was fascinating because Shashi Ruya earlier in the day was talking about the worthlessness of bonds, you know. And I remember both the farmers said that beyond a point, getting money is just paper because there is value beyond paper money and bonds, you know. So it was amazing to see that commonality there. Katie, the question I left you with, you know, would your policies hold good if you came to the center?
No, okay. You left me with a question on first the financial package which we are seeking. Let me tell you, we are not seeking, as a state, West Bengal is not seeking any financial package. We inherited a state where 22,000 crore rupees per annum is the only repayment and interest. Our total collection is 26,000 crores. Now, how do we expect us to run the state? 8,000 is only salaries and pensions, which no state government can refuse. Where is the money for development? We did not create it, we inherited it. So the only thing West Bengal state government has been asking for the last 1.5 years from the central government is the deferment of the payment. There is no money which they are asking.
That's a fair...
So that was, it's not any, we are going out with a begging bowl and asking for a financial package. As far as policies are concerned, again I'm saying we are not anti-reformist. We supported FDI in aviation.
So where it makes sense.
Yeah, where it made sense. Now, FDI in retail. Our thinking is that...
Yeah, to create new jobs, you'll push other people out of jobs.
I'll give you the numbers. I mean, Walmart, I know maybe Rajan will kill me for that, but Walmart does a business of $420 billion and employs 2 million people. Our entire trade, the retail trade, is $410 billion and there are 50 million people employed in that. So our fear is, as a party representing the interest of the Aam Aadmi, our fear is that if the FDI in retail comes, it will push these people out of jobs. Now hold it. I say that this is our assumption. If you think, the government thinks that what is democracy? Democracy is by the people, of the people, for the people, which means the larger writ of the people, the larger interest of the people, what people think should be implemented. If this government thinks that we are wrong, then let people decide. Let Parliament decide. What was the hurry to issue an executive order, sneak it through? No, we are against it. Now tell me where is it wrong?
In fact, you know, I had to rush another person through their session, Ulka Mahajan, the land activist, but there's a wonderful statistic that, you know, they often speak of, that to create every one urban job, 300 people are put out of their jobs in rural India, you know. Which brings me to my final question to you, Mr. Munjal. You mentioned, you know, the fact that rural clusters of prosperity can be created. But why is it that in mainstream media, and that includes CII and FICCI and all the think tanks from industry, why is there not such an urgent articulation of this possibility? You know, why is there such a panic created that if we only don't do this, then this country is going to collapse?
You know, the environment, work environment in India has not been the easiest, as we know. And the example is very clear. If you look at which businesses have been successful in the last 15 or 20 years, is those where government either did not exist or from where government stepped back. Those businesses became successful. Now, and it's a fact, by the way, I'm not saying this as a slogan, it's a reality. The government has been extremely burdensome for business. It's over-involved, it's interfered. Government's business is not to be in business. Its business is to govern. And because of which industry has been so focused and so nervous every time there's a conversation which talks about more regulation or government taking funding away from what would be potentially helpful to industry to rural areas, they get nervous. And this happened 5 or 7 years ago when they talked of direct intervention in the rural areas. Because earlier everyone believed that trickle-down would work, the economy would grow, everybody would benefit, but it takes too long. So when direct intervention started, industry was the biggest resistor. They resisted this very, very strongly. Pretty soon they found this was actually fantastic because not only was infrastructure getting built in the rural areas, you were building a new class of consumers. And when consumer companies went, the desires of the individual consumers there is not very different from the cities. What do you think sells most in the rural areas? It's lipstick, it's toothpaste, it's shampoos. So industry found pretty soon, this is absolutely fantastic. On the one hand, it's defensive because if you don't do this, you're not too far from where France, Russia, or China was, 5 or 10 years before they had the revolutions. And on the other hand, you have the potential of building the world's largest growth market. So industry is interested, but it's just fearsome that if it takes the ball eye off the ball from what's required for industry, that they just may start interfering too much back again and not be supportive for the initiatives which are required for the larger growth of the overall economy.
So one final question, because I think we've completely run out of time, is that, you know, it is the sense of...
But by the way, industry is supportive of this. I have to tell you this. Today, industry is very, very supportive.
You know, much of the corruption does arise out of the nexus. It's almost that the old license Raj actually hasn't disappeared at all. So, you know, one doesn't argue with that. But if industry really is that enlightened, Mr. Munjal, the government is awful on environmental norms. Why are companies so lax, I mean, almost derelict, criminal in their environmental enlightenment?
I think all
Why can't you do that without government enforcing it?
I think all industry is not very enlightened. I think we have to acknowledge the fact that this is a reflection of society itself. Industry is not an island. It's part of what we are as a society. It's no different, and government is no different either. It's all of us. We pick the leaders, we become leaders. There are people in this room who are leaders as well. And I think we need to think about this a little bit ourselves as a cultural and a societal issue. If you look inside, what is it that I am doing which helps better the lot of people around me? It's a very simple statement to make, but it has a very large implication if you focus on all of the aspects of this. And there are increasingly more and more companies who are saying we need to make that change for people around us. First for people who work within our companies, and then for people around us. But not enough has been done. And because the primary role of this was the government's, and government has not been able to play this role fully. So there is a room now for industry to say, we will support this. Those who are derelict themselves are certainly not going to do this. They will do some as a sham. If you say there's a compulsory 2% spend of your profits, people will start showing, I believe, training costs, etc., as part of the social spend.
Yep.
But social awareness needs to arise in individuals, not in companies.
Thank you. Personally, I would have, sorry.
There you go.
Personally, this is a conversation one could carry on for much longer, but thank you all of you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners,
we shall overcome.